"There's your wine-jug ornament," the courtier said, loud enough for the whole high table to turn. "Tallies, do they polish him with the silver, or only when the foreign guests are coming?" The laughter ran down the table the way spilled oil runs down a slope, fast, easy, hard to stop once it starts. I stood 8 feet from the man being laughed at, my own post at the corner of the dais, and I watched Sergeant Cael Maddox take it the way he took everything that night. Not at all. He did not turn his head. He did not move his eyes from the middle distance over the candles. He stood at the edge of the new Queen's coronation banquet in his red tunic and his white gloves, his hand on the pommel of a ceremonial sword nobody expected him to draw, and he let himself be furniture, because that was the post, and the post was the whole of it. I had stood beside Cael for 2 years, and I had never once seen him answer a thing said to him on the line. I assumed, that night, that there was nothing under the stillness but more stillness. By the time the candles guttered, I would understand that I had been looking at a deep well and calling it a painted wall. The hall was the grandest thing the kingdom owned. They called it the Hall of the 100 Banners, and that night every one of the 100 hung new and clean from the dark rafters, and beneath them 4 long tables ran the length of the floor packed with the great houses of the realm and the envoys of 3 neighbor crowns, and at the head of it all, raised on the dais where Cael and I stood the inner watch, sat Queen Leora of the House of Veredin, crowned that very morning, 19 years old. With the weight of a kingdom, 4 hours on her head, and her hands folded too carefully in her lap. She was new. That was the thing the whole hall knew, and the whole hall was measuring. Her father had died in the winter and her elder brother 3 weeks after him of the same fever, and the crown had come down the line to a girl who had not been raised to wear it, and every man at those 4 tables had a private opinion about what that meant for him. Some of those opinions were loyal, some were not. You could not have told which by looking, and that is exactly why men like Cael and me are posted at the corners of a banquet with our swords we are not expected to draw, because the danger in a room like that does not come in shouting. It comes smiling, with a cup in its hand. The courtier who had named Cael an ornament was Lord Brennan Tallies, and he was the kind of man who is most dangerous to the small people near him precisely because he is in no danger himself. He was master of the Queen's table, the office that arranged the seating, approved the dishes, governed the order of the toasts. He had served the old king in the same post, and he had expected, I think, to govern the new queen as easily as he governed her cutlery. He had been drinking since the 2nd course and finding the girl on the throne harder to govern than he liked, and so he had turned, as small men do, to govern the smallest thing in reach. "I'll tell you a secret about the Queen's guard," Tallies said to the foreign envoy on his right, tilting toward him with his cup. "Magnificent furniture, polished, plumed, perfectly useless. You could swap that one there for a suit of empty armor, and the only difference is the armor wouldn't cost you a wage." He flicked 2 fingers toward Cael without looking at him. "Decorative, every inch. The realm pays a fortune to stand pretty men in corners." The envoy laughed politely. A few of the younger lords laughed less politely, and Cael Maddox stood his post and gave them nothing, no flush, no flicker, no tightening of the jaw, and I felt the old anger I always felt on his behalf and could never show, because I was furniture too, and furniture does not defend furniture. What none of them knew, what I did not know, was that Cael Maddox had not been looking at the middle distance over the candles for the last quarter hour. He had been looking, very precisely, at the wine. I learned the rest of it after in pieces, some from him and most from other men, because Cael never told a story about himself if he could help it. But I will tell it the way it happened, because I was there for the part that mattered, and the part that mattered is the only part Cael would have wanted told. The order of a coronation banquet is a fixed and ancient thing. There are 7 courses and there are 5 toasts, and the last toast, the great one, the one the whole evening is built toward, is the loyalty cup. At the loyalty cup, a single great vessel is filled at the high table blessed, and carried down so that the chief of every great house may drink from it in turn and so swear with his own mouth on the rim that his house holds true to the crown. The queen drinks first. Then the cup goes down the line. It is the oldest oath in the kingdom, older than the hall, older than the house of Veridin itself, and on the night a new monarch takes the throne it is not a ceremony. It is the whole point of the night. It is the kingdom deciding in front of itself that the girl with 4 hours of crown on her head is the queen. The cup for that oath had stood all evening on a side table at the back of the dais, in the keeping of the master of the queen's table. In the keeping, that is, of Lord Brennan Tallies. I did not think about the cup. Why would I? It was Tallies's office in Tallies's honor, and 100 coronations had passed it down the line without a single drop going wrong. I thought about the doors and the windows and the 400 faces, the way you are trained to. I thought about the envoys and which of them sat too still. I did not think about a cup on a back table because a cup on a back table is not a threat. A drawn knife is a threat. A shout is a threat. A cup is just a cup. Cael thought about the cup. Cael, I would learn, had not stopped thinking about cups in 11 years. The 5th course came and went. Lord Tallies grew louder and the young queen grew quieter, and twice I saw her glance at the long room full of men deciding about her and then down at her folded hands, and I felt, standing my useless decorative post, a thing I was not paid to feel, which was that somebody ought to be on her side in that room, and I could not tell that anybody was. And then, between the 5th course and the 6th, a steward I did not know carried a fresh ewer of spiced wine to the side table and set it by the loyalty cup and bowed to Lord Tallies and went away. It was the smallest event in the hall. Nobody marked it. A servant brought wine to the master of the table. The sun also rose in the east. Cael marked it. I did not understand it then, but I saw the smallest change come over the man beside me. He did not move, but the quality of his stillness changed, the way the air changes before weather, and his eyes, which had been on the middle distance all night, came down and settled on that ewer the way a hawk settle on a thing in the grass. I leaned the smallest fraction toward him. On the line you learn to speak without moving your lips, in a low, flat breath that does not travel. What? I said. The steward, Cael breathed back. He did not look at me. Watch him go. I watched. The steward who had carried the ewer was crossing the back of the hall toward the service screen, unhurried, a gray man with a gray face, and there was nothing wrong with the way he walked except this, which I would never have noticed and Cael had noticed in a heartbeat. He did not look back. Every servant in that hall, carrying anything to the high table on coronation night, glanced back at least once at the thing he had set down, because to a servant the high table is the whole world and a man cannot help looking at the sun. This one did not. He had set down his ewer and severed himself from it entirely, the way a man walks away from a thing he never wants to be connected to again. He brought wine, I breathed. It's a banquet. He brought that ewer to that table, Cael said. Nobody told him to. Tallies's own man does the wine. I've watched the man do it all night. He pours from the gold ewer, the one with the Veridin stag. That one's plain pewter. It came from outside the order of the table. A pause, half a breath. And it's wrong. Wrong how? He didn't answer that, not then. He couldn't have made me understand it, not in a flat whisper on the line, not in the time we had. He only said, stay your post. Whatever I do, you hold the queen's right hand. Don't follow me. Cover the gap I make. I have served 11 years and I have taken many orders, and I have never in my life wanted less to obey one. Because what Cael did next was the thing you are never, ever to do on the inner watch. He stepped off his post. He did it so smoothly that I think I was the only living soul who saw it for what it was. He did not stride. He did not draw. He turned, unhurried, the way a guard turns when he is sent on some small errand of the watch, and he walked the 8 feet to the side table at the back of the dais where the loyalty cup stood waiting and the new pewter ewer stood beside it, and he stopped there, at parade rest, as if he had been posted to guard the cup itself. Which, in fairness, was a thing a guard might do, and so not one head at the 4 long tables turned. One head turned. Lord Brennan Tallies, master of the Queen's table, went very still over his cup, and watched the decorative man walk to the wine. I held the Queen's right hand, as I'd been told. I covered the gap. And out of the side of my eye, I watched Cael Maddox do something I have turned over in my mind 1,000 nights since, because it was the strangest and the most disciplined thing I ever saw a man do in a crowded room. He did not touch the ewer. He bent his head a degree as if to check that the cup was clean and ready, and he breathed. That was all. He stood over the pewter ewer of spiced wine, and he took the air off the mouth of it into his lungs, slow, the way you take the steam off a healing draught, and his face, I was watching his face now and I could not stop, did the only thing I ever saw it do on duty. It closed, not in surprise, in recognition. The way your face closes when you hear a name you have not heard in years, and hoped never to hear again. Spiced wine smells of 100 things. Clove and orange peel and the warm sweetness of the must and the iron of the cup. A man could hide a great deal under spiced wine, and that, I understood much later, was exactly why a clever poisoner serves it warm and spiced on a coronation night, and exactly why one man in that hall of 400 could not be fooled by it. Because under the clove and the orange and the warm sweet must, Cael Maddox smelled a thing that has almost no smell at all, a faint green bitterness, like crushed cherry stones, like the inside of an apple seed, the smell of a substance that is colorless in wine and tasteless under spice, and that does not announce itself until it has already done its work. He smelled it the way you would smell smoke in a house full of sleeping people, and he knew it for what it was, the way only a man can know it who has spent years of his life with his nose over cups exactly like this one, learning the difference between wine and death so that other men would never have to. He straightened. He did not raise an alarm. An alarm in that room on that night with that cup would have been its own kind of catastrophe. 400 armed and frightened nobles, 3 foreign crowns, a girl 4 hours into her reign, and a master of the table standing ready to say that the decorative guard had gone mad and disgraced the oath. Cael knew all of that in the space of a held breath, and he did the thing the situation actually required, which was nothing dramatic at all. He turned, came back the 8 feet, and resumed his post at the corner of the dais as if he had only stepped over to be sure the cup was ready, and he stood and he breathed, and he waited. I could not stand it. Cael, I breathed, what is in the wine? Death, he said, and it goes in the Queen's cup at the loyalty oath. They'll pour the ewer into the loyalty cup at the blessing, and she'll drink first in front of the realm, and it will look like the crown rejected her. The oldest oath in the kingdom, and it kills the one who swears it. His jaw moved a hair. It's the most elegant murder I've ever stood next to. And I've stood next to a few. The way he said that, flat, certain, a craftsman's grudging respect for a thing well made, was the first crack in the painted wall. I had served beside this man for 2 years. I did not know him at all. Then we stopped the cup, I breathed. We can't just stop it, Cael said. Tallies controls the cup, the order, the blessing. If I knock it from a hand, I'm a madman who broke the coronation oath, and they put me down where I stand, and the next ewer comes next month and she's just as dead. We don't stop the cup. His eyes came up, off the middle distance, and found the new young queen for 1/2 second, and there was something in them I can only call a decision. We change who drinks first. You're not making sense. I will, he said. Get me the steward of the watch, quietly, tell him the old word. What old word? Tell him a guardsman on the line says, the cup does not pass. He'll know, he'll come. I did not understand the word, but I understood the man, and there is a thing you learn on the line that is worth more than understanding, which is who to obey when the floor is moving under you. I caught the eye of a steward of the watch at the wall and gave him the small flat signal that brings the steward, and I bent my mouth to his ear and said the words exactly. The cup does not pass. He went the color of the tablecloth, and he went fast, and I learned later why those 4 words emptied a man's face. They were not a phrase of the Queen's Guard at all. They were a phrase out of an older office, an office the realm keeps and does not speak of, the office of the man whose whole life is the safety of what the crown puts in its mouth. Because that, it turned out, was what Cael Maddox had been, before he was a sentry standing decorative in a corner. He had been the examiner of the cup. I will tell it the way he finally told me, years later, on a winter night when he was willing, and not before, because it is his to tell and he hated the telling. In the old king's reign there was an office older than the Queen's Guard and far smaller, 3 men in the whole kingdom, and at the end only 1. They were not tasters in the cheap sense, the poor wretches you read of in stories who drink first and die so a king can dine in peace. The examiner of the cup did not protect the king by dying. He protected the king by knowing, by spending 15 years of his life learning every poison the world had ever cooked, learning what each one did to wine and to bread and to the steam off a soup, learning to read a doctored cup by its color in candlelight, and its weight in the hand, and above all by its smell. The faint wrong note a clever murderer thinks he has buried under spice, and never quite can. The examiner stood at the king's elbow at every state meal and every treaty feast and every dangerous table for 15 years, and in 15 years not 1 drop of poison ever reached the old king's lips, and the realm slept easy and never knew his name, because the whole art of the office is that nothing ever happens. You succeed by making murder fail so quietly that history records a peaceful reign and forgets you entirely. Cael had been the last of them. When the old king died of honest age and the office passed to a new and frightened court that wanted soldiers it could see and not a quiet man who smelled cups, they thanked him and pensioned the office shut. And Cael Maddox, who had stood at a king's elbow for 15 years and could not imagine standing anywhere else, had asked for the only thing he wanted, which was to stay near the table. They gave him a sentry's tunic and a corner of the dais and a ceremonial sword, and they thought they were giving an old servant a soft retirement. They had, without knowing it, posted the deadliest defensive mind in the kingdom 8 feet from the new queen's wine, and then forgotten he was there. The taster they did not know they had. Tallies did not know. The poisoner, whoever had sent the gray steward with the pewter ewer, did not know. The whole bright laughing hall did not know. They saw a polished man in a corner, magnificent furniture, perfectly useless, and they were exactly as right about that as a man is right who calls a sheathed blade a paperweight. The steward of the watch came, as Cael had said he would, fast and gray-faced, and knelt as if adjusting a buckle at Cael's boot, which let the 2 of them speak head to head for the length of 3 breaths. I did not hear it all. I heard the back ewer, and I heard cherry stone, and I heard the steward say, low and shaken, "Are you certain? On your life, Cael, are you certain?" And I heard Cael answer in a voice with no doubt in it anywhere, "I was certain at 6 feet. I'm certain now. It's bitter-almond and it's in the back ewer, and that ewer goes in the loyalty cup." Then we clear the hall. "You clear nothing," Cael said. "You clear the hall and you tell the man who did this that he failed and he is in this room and he tries again next month when I'm not standing here. We don't catch a cup, we catch a hand." A pause. "Do you trust me, after everything? Do you trust me with 1 more cup?" And the steward of the watch, who had clearly known Cael in the old days and clearly owed him things I would never be told, closed his eyes for a moment and then said, "I have trusted you with the lives of kings. Tell me what you need." What Cael needed was 3 things, and he laid them out in the time it takes a course to be cleared, in flat, fast words, while the hall laughed and Lord Tallies grew louder, and the new queen folded her hands. He needed the order of the toast changed by a single line, a line that was the examiner's own, ancient, lawful, written into the coronation, rite by some long-dead king who had himself nearly died at his own oath. He needed the master of the table not to know it was coming. And he needed me to hold the queen's right hand and not move, no matter what, because the one move that would get her killed now was a guard who panicked. "The rite," the steward breathed. "You mean the cupbearer's rite?" "I mean the cupbearer's rite," Cael said. "It hasn't been called in 40 years. Tallies won't remember it exists. But it's in the book, and the book is the law of the rite, and no master of the table can refuse it, because the king who wrote it knew exactly what a master of the table can do to a cup." I did not know what the cupbearer's rite was. I would learn in about a quarter of an hour, when Cael Maddox stepped out of his decorative corner in front of 3 foreign crowns and the assembled power of the realm and claimed it. The 6th course was cleared. The 7th came and went almost untasted, because the whole hall could feel the night bending toward its hinge. And then the master of ceremonies struck the floor 3 times with his black staff, and the hall of the 100 banners fell into the deep waiting silence that comes before an oath, and Lord Brennan Tallies rose, smoothing his robe, well pleased with himself, to begin the loyalty cup. He gestured, and his own man brought the gold ewer with the Veridan stag, and from it Tallies filled the great loyalty cup at the high table, a foot of chased silver, the oldest vessel the kingdom owned, and I let myself breathe, because the gold ewer was the safe one, the one Cael had watched all night, and for one foolish instant I thought we had been wrong, or that the danger had passed. Then Tallies lifted the plain pewter ewer, the one the gray steward had brought, and he topped the loyalty cup from it. "The new wine for the new reign," he said, smiling to a murmur of approval, and I understood the whole shape of it at last. The safe wine to fill it and pass the eye, the poisoned wine on top to reach the lips. A man could watch the gold ewer all night and never see the death come in at the end from the plain one. It was, as Cael had said, elegant. It was the work of a mind that had thought of everything. Of everything but one. Of everything but the decorative man in the corner. Tallies raised the brimming loyalty cup in both hands and turned to the young queen, and his voice filled the hall. "Your Majesty. By the oldest oath of this realm, the crown drinks first, and the houses follow, that all may swear they hold true. Will you take the cup of your reign?" The queen rose. She was very pale and very straight, and she put out her 2 hands for the cup, and 400 faces watched the girl 4 hours into her crown reach for the silver, and not one of them but 2 knew that what was coming down to her hands was death dressed as an oath. And Cael Maddox stepped out of his corner and said, in a voice I had never once heard him use, a voice that filled the hall of the 100 banners to the rafters, "Hold! By the cupbearer's rite, the cup does not pass." The hall did not breathe. The queen's hand stopped a span from the silver. And Lord Brennan Tallies turned on the decorative man in the corner with a look I will remember to the end of my days, because for 1/2 second, before he mastered it, there was naked terror in it, and a guilty man's terror and an innocent man's surprise do not look the same, and I saw which one it was. Then Tallies laughed. It was a good laugh, he was practiced, it carried. "The cupbearer's what? Your Majesty, forgive him, the man has stood too long in the heat. Steward, take your guardsman out before he—" "It is in the book," said the steward of the watch, stepping forward, and his voice shook, but it did not stop. "The cupbearer's rite, written into the Coronation rite by King Aldous III, who was poisoned at his own oath and survived it. Any sworn man of the guard may claim it before the crown drinks. It cannot be refused by the master of the table." He turned to the master of ceremonies, the old man with the black staff, who had served 4 reigns and forgot nothing. "Is it not so?" The old master of ceremonies looked at Tallies and looked at Cael and looked a long time at the book of the rite on its stand, and then he struck the floor once with his black staff and said in a voice as dry as paper, "It is so. The rite stands. The cup is held." And he turned to Cael. "Guardsman, state your right." Tallies's face had gone past terror now into something colder, and his hand, I was watching his hands, the way Cael had taught me in the space of one night to watch hands. His hand had drifted to the table near a steward who was not a steward, a broad gray man at the back of the dais who had begun, very slightly, to shift his weight. I did not take my hand from the queen's right side. But I marked the broad gray man, and I let him see that I marked him, and he went still. Cael walked to the high table. He did not hurry, and he did not bow low. He gave the new queen the precise inclination owed to a crowned head and no more, and then he turned and faced the hall, 400 of the most powerful people in the kingdom and 3 foreign crowns, and he spoke to all of them at once, and his voice was the flat, certain voice of a man stating a fact, not pleading a case. "My name is Cael Maddox," he said. "For 15 years I was the examiner of the cup to the late king. There are men in this hall old enough to remember the office. I stood at His Majesty's elbow at every state table of his reign, and in 15 years no poison ever reached his lips, and you never heard my name, because that is how the office is done well." He let that sit one breath. "Tonight I have been standing in the corner of this hall as a sentry of the Queen's Guard. An hour ago a steward no one knew brought a plain pewter ewer to the master's side table out of the order of the night, unasked, and walked away from it without once looking back, which no honest servant does. I examined that ewer. I did not touch it. I did not need to. The wine in it is poisoned with the oil of bitter-almond, which is colorless in red wine, and which a man hides under spice and warmth, because under spice and warmth no ordinary palate will find it." His eyes found tallies. "But I am not an ordinary palate, and that ewer was poured into this cup on top of the safe wine at the end, so that the eye would pass it and the lip would not. The queen drinks first at the loyalty oath. She would have died at her own coronation, holding the oldest oath in the kingdom, and the realm would have whispered for 100 years that the crown itself rejected her." The silence in the Hall of the 100 Banners was the loudest thing I have ever heard. "That is a grave accusation," said the master of ceremonies, and his old voice was iron now. "And the rite requires more than a nose. You have named a poison. Prove it or answer for the naming." "I will prove it," Cael said. "There is one true test in the book, the test King Aldous wrote, and I claim it now." He turned to the queen, and for the first time his voice changed only a degree, only enough that I, who had stood beside him 2 years and never heard it, and what was in it was an old, plain soldier's tenderness. "Your Majesty, the cupbearer's rite gives the cup before the crown drinks to the man who claims it. Will you grant me leave to drink first from the cup of your reign?" The hall held its breath, and 400 people leaned to watch a guardsman ask to drink death, and every one of them believed that was what he meant to do, fall in front of the realm to save the new queen, the magnificent furniture spending itself in one last grand gesture. Lord Tallies believed it too. I saw the terror slide back into something almost like relief, because a dead guard tells no tales, and a man who drinks his proof and dies of it has proved only that he was mad enough to drink. The young queen looked at Cael Maddox a long moment. She was 19 years old and 4 hours crowned, and she had been measured all night by a room full of men who thought her too new to read them, and she did the one thing none of them expected, which was that she read him exactly right. "No," said Queen Leora of the House of Veredin. Her voice did not shake. "The examiner of my late father's table will not throw his life away on my account at my first dinner. I have lost a father and a brother to a fever this winter. I will not begin my reign by spending a man who is trying to save me." She set her 2 hands flat on the table. "Examine the cup, Sergeant. Whatever the book gives you that does not require you to die, take it. The crown will wait." And something moved in Cael Maddox's face then that I had not seen all night. For 1/2 second, he was surprised. He had braced his whole life on the certainty that the people he guarded did not see him, and she had seen him in the space of 1 sentence. I think that mattered to him more than the medal they tried to give him after, and never could make him wear. "Then I will not drink, Majesty," Cael said. "I never meant to. A man who must die to find a poison is no examiner. He is only the last one to learn there was one. The book gives a cleaner test, and I claim it." He turned to the old master of ceremonies. "The touch of silver and the touch of the cup stone. Bring me the King Aldous stone from the right stand. It has lain in the foot of the coronation chest for 40 years because no one has called the rite. It is there. Look." The master of ceremonies sent a steward to the chest, and the steward came back white-faced with a small flat disc of dark polished stone in a silver mount. The touchstone King Aldous had ordered bound into the rite after the night he nearly died, and the old man held it up so the hall could see it was a real thing out of the real book and not a guardsman's invention. "Now," Cael said, his voice carrying to the rafters with the flat certainty of a man teaching a thing he has taught 100 times, "I will not touch the loyalty cup. The master of the table will pour for me in front of all of you so that no man can say the guardsman tampered with the proof." He looked at Lord Brennan Tallies, and the look was not anger. It was worse than anger, the patient attention of a man who already knows the answer and is only waiting for the room to catch up. "My lord, you filled this cup. Pour 3 drops of it onto the stone, just 3, your own hand, the whole realm watching." And there it was, the trap, sprung so quietly that half the hall did not understand it had closed until it was already shut. Because a poisoner cannot pour his own poison onto a stone that will turn at the touch of it, and an innocent man cannot refuse to pour 3 harmless drops of consecrated wine in front of 400 witnesses. There was no third door. Cael had built him a room with 2 exits, and both of them led to the gallows, and he had built it in the space of one held breath, while the rest of us were still thinking about a cup. Lord Tallies did not move. The loyalty cup stood a foot from his hand, brimming, and the small dark stone waited on its silver mount, and the master of ceremonies set it on the table before him with a click that was the loudest sound in the world. "Pour, my lord," said the old man. "The rite requires it. You cannot refuse the stone." For 3 breaths Brennan Tallies was the only still man in the Hall of the 100 Banners, and he was not still the way Cael was still. He was the stillness of a man at the edge of a long drop, the stillness of a thing about to break. And then he made the choice that hangs every guilty man in the end, which is the choice to gamble that the floor is not really gone. He reached for the cup slow, and I saw the calculation cross his face, that perhaps the stone was old and dead, that perhaps 40 years in a chest had ruined it, that perhaps the decorative guardsman was wrong after all. "Don't," said the broad gray man at the back of the dais. It was the false steward, the man who had carried the ewer and never looked back. He said it without thinking, the way a man cries out when he sees a thing he has worked for about to be destroyed, and in saying it he destroyed himself, because 400 people turned and looked at the one man in the hall with a reason to stop Lord Tallies pouring. The gray man moved then fast toward the doors, and that was the moment the night could have gone wrong, because a frightened man bolting through a hall of armed nobles is how innocent people die. But Cael had not come alone. 2 sentries had drifted to the service screen a quarter hour before, on a flat word passed hand to hand from the corner of the dais, because Cael had set this too, in the same held breath, while I was still thinking about a cup. They closed the gray man between them before he had gone 4 steps and bore him down without a blow struck, the way you take a man you mean to keep alive to question. No sword left its sheath in the whole hall. That was the thing I understood last and value most. In a room of 400 armed and frightened people, with 3 foreign crowns watching, the deadliest man present had foiled a murder and not let one weapon be drawn. The discipline was the weapon. It always had been. "Pour the stone, my lord," said the master of ceremonies again, and now there was no mercy left in the old voice at all. Lord Brennan Tallies looked at the cup, and looked at the gray man pinned to his own banqueting floor, and looked at the 400 faces, and the practiced charm ran off his face like water off oiled cloth and left nothing under it but a small cold man who had lost. He did not pour. He could not. And his not pouring was, in that hall and before that book, as good as a confession written in his own hand. So Cael did it. He asked the Queen's leave with his eyes, and she gave it with the smallest nod, and he took up the loyalty cup at last, gloved, careful, the cup he had not let himself touch, until the proof belonged to no one but the rite. and he tilted 3 drops of the spiced wine onto the dark King Aldous stone where every eye in the hall could see, and he set the cup down and he stepped back, and he let the stone speak for him. It bloomed. Where the wine touched the polished dark face of the stone, the 3 drops did not bead and run like wine. They spread and dulled and turned, in the space of 10 heartbeats, to a flat chalk-white ring that no wine on earth makes, the old reaction King Aldous had bound into the rite 40 years before precisely, so that no man would ever again have to drink to find out. The master of ceremonies lifted the stone in both hands and turned slowly, so that the high table and the 4 long tables and the 3 foreign crowns could all see the white ring on the black face of the proof. And the Hall of the 100 Banners made a sound I have never heard a great crowd make before or since. Not a gasp and not a cry, but a long, low breath let out all at once. 400 people understanding in the same instant that the new queen had been one swallow from death, and a man in a corner had stood between her, and it all night without once being asked. The rest belongs to other men to tell, and I will give it short, because Cael would want it short. Tallies was taken from his own banqueting hall by the watch he had spent his life sneering at, and the gray man told what he knew before morning to spare his neck. A chain that ran past Tallies to 2 great houses that had bet on a contested succession, and meant to start one by leaving a girl dead at her own oath. The cup meant to make a kingdom doubt its queen became, instead, the night the kingdom decided it loved her. A poisoned coronation does not end with one death. It ends with 20 years of war over who poured the cup. Cael had not saved one life that night. He had saved a generation that would never know his name, which was, I came to understand, the only kind of saving he had ever cared to do. They poured the loyalty cup again from the safe gold ewer, under the eyes of the whole hall and the King Aldous stone, and the queen drank first, and the cup went down the line, and every great house of the realm set its mouth to the rim and swore, and the oldest oath in the kingdom held. I watched the color come back into a room that had nearly turned to a tomb, and I thought I had seen the end of it. But there was one more thing, and it is the thing I have carried longest. When the oath was done, Queen Leora rose, and the hall rose with her, and she looked down the length of the high table to where Cael Maddox had already walked the 8 feet back to his corner and resumed his post, hand on the pommel of the ceremonial sword he had never drawn, eyes forward on the middle distance over the candles, as though nothing in the world had happened and nothing ever did. He had foiled a murder, named himself before the realm, and put himself back in his corner like a tool returned to its place, because the post was the whole of it, and a man does not take a bow for standing where he is told. "Examiner," the queen said, and her voice carried the length of the hall. "You will not stand in a corner of my hall." "It is my post, Majesty," said Cael, not turning his head. "Then I am changing the post," she said. "You stood at my father's elbow for 15 years and the realm never knew your name. It will know it now. There will be an examiner of the cup again by my warrant by morning, and the man who never let it lapse will stand first in it." And then she did the thing I have told 100 times since and will tell until I die. She came down from the dais, a queen 4 hours crowned, crossed the floor to the corner where the decorative man stood his useless decorative post, and inclined her head, a queen, to a sentry, and said, "Lo, for him and not for the chronicles, thank you for not drinking. I have had enough of men dying for me this winter. I would rather have you standing." I was close enough to see it. Cael Maddox, who took everything that night the way he took everything, not at all. Cael Maddox's eyes came down off the middle distance for 1/2 second and found the face of his queen, and his throat moved once, and he said the only thing he ever said about any of it that I heard with my own ears. "As you wish, Majesty, I'll keep standing." He did. He stood the queen's table for 19 more years, and not one drop of poison ever reached her lips, and the realm forgot his name all over again, which was exactly how he wanted it, because the whole art of the office is that nothing ever happens. They struck him a medal he would not wear, and he went on standing in his corner with his hand on a sword. He never drew magnificent furniture, polished, perfectly useless, while the great houses laughed at the wine-jug ornament and never once guessed that the safest seat in the kingdom was the one nearest the man they mocked. I served beside him to the end, and on the night he finally told me the rest of it, the winter night when he was willing, I asked him the thing I had wondered for 20 years, how he had stood there all those evenings and let them call him empty, let them call him furniture, and never once answered. He thought about it a long time, the way he thought about everything, and then he said the truest thing anyone ever said to me about the work we did. "A man who needs them to know what he is," Cael said, "isn't guarding them, he's guarding himself. The day you stop needing the room to see you is the day you can finally watch the room." He turned his cup a quarter turn on the table, an old habit, checking it without thinking, 15 years and 19 more written into his hands. "Let them call me furniture. Furniture stands close to the king, and furniture they never search." Then he drank from a cup he had not had to test, in a quiet room with no one's life on it, and said nothing else. And that was the most I ever got from him, and it was enough. I have stood 100 posts since in 100 ignored corners, and on the bad nights when the laughter runs down the table, the way spilled oil runs down a slope, I think of a man who smelled death under spice and saved a kingdom and walked back to his corner, and I stand my post, and I watch the room, and I do not need it to see me. That is the whole of it. That is the only part Cael would have wanted told.